The incident began on a bright November afternoon in a public park that had seen better days. Leaves scattered across the pavement, wind cutting through open spaces, and a handful of people lingering near benches and brick walls. Among them sat Harold Hawk Dawson, a 69-year-old disabled veteran whose life had folded on itself over the years. His leg, weakened by shrapnel from wars most people Leia's age never bothered to learn about, stretched stiffly along the ground. He had come to the park to rest in silence, invisible to nearly everyone who passed. But he was not invisible to Leia Crawford. At 16, surrounded by friends and driven by a hunger for online attention, she had learned to view the world through the lens of her phone. Every moment was an opportunity, every person a potential prop. When she approached Harold that day, her phone recording, she wore the self-assurance of someone who believed that consequences were optional. The cameras captured her poised foot, her amused expression, the quick flick of her leg as it struck Harold's side, and the startled pain that contorted the old man's face as he collapsed back against the wall. Her friends laughed, exhilarated by the recklessness of it, already anticipating the surge of views. The video traveled faster than she imagined. Within hours, thousands had seen it, and within days, the city of Providence was murmuring about the governor's daughter and the homeless veteran she turned into entertainment. Even before the case entered the courtroom, the weight of public outrage hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Judge Caprio, a man who had spent over 3 decades in law, viewed the video from his chambers with a growing heaviness. He had seen many forms of cruelty, but there was something uniquely hollow about cruelty committed for amusement, cruelty broadcasted, packaged, and consumed. He watched the clip again and again, not out of disbelief, but because each detail revealed the deeper tragedy. A child so insulated by privilege that empathy had never been required of her. The courtroom filled early on the morning of the hearing. Reporters lined the back wall, residents packed the benches, and the city waited for justice. Leia arrived with the indifference of someone expecting the world to bend, as it always had. She slouched in her seat, unimpressed by the gravity of the space around her. Her mother, Governor Melissa Crawford, was absent at first. Another appointment, another separation between political duty and maternal responsibility. Leia assumed her mother's influence would smooth this over like every past misstep, but the narrative she depended on slipped through her grasp as the courtroom doors opened and Harold Dawson entered slowly, steadied by his cane. His presence disrupted her composure. He sat quietly, dignified despite the hardship carved into his features. The room softened around him, as if people could feel the years he carried. Evidence unfolded in orderly fashion. Written reports, recovered footage, transcripts documenting Leia's dismissive words during her arrest, her insistence that assaulting a homeless man somehow didn't count. The courtroom absorbed each detail with disbelief and disappointment. The contrast between her indifference and Harold's quiet endurance painted a harsh portrait of entitlement. Then came the revelation no one expected. The judge presented the truth about Governor Crawford's hidden volunteer work. 2 years of anonymous service at a homeless shelter. 2 years of listening to strangers who had lost everything. 2 years of quietly funding programs that protected the very people her daughter had dehumanized. The information landed like a blow. The community saw a mother trying to repair a world while her daughter chipped pieces from it. And Leia, overwhelmed by the disclosure, felt her shield of privilege crumble in front of the crowd. Her mother eventually entered the courtroom, not as a rescuer, but as a witness. Witness to her daughter's behavior, witness to her own perceived failures. Her presence shifted the air. She refused to intervene, refused to use her power to amend or soften the outcome. Instead, she carried the disappointment and heartbreak of a parent realizing her values had not taken root. The sentencing that followed was not crafted to break Leia, but to rebuild her. Community service, restitution, educational programs, reflective writing, all designed not as punishment but transformation. Harold, given the opportunity to speak, asked only that she learn to see people again, to see him, to see anyone. By the time the hearing ended, the courtroom felt altered, as though the collective understanding of dignity and humanity had sharpened. Leia left the room stripped of arrogance, shaken by the sudden clarity that her life would not move forward untouched. And somewhere beneath her fear was something unfamiliar, perhaps the first fragile flicker of responsibility. The first Tuesday evening at Hope Harbor Homeless Shelter marked the beginning of Leia's education. Not the academic kind, but the kind that demanded humility, accountability, and a willingness to confront the consequences of her worldview. The shelter, a place woven together by exhausted hands and tired hearts, smelled of simmering soup and disinfectant. Volunteers moved quietly between tables, stacking plates, stirring pots, setting out bowls. They welcomed new helpers with gentle nods, too accustomed to transient assistance to expect much of it. When Leia stepped inside, she carried the weight of her sentence like a physical burden. Her mother had driven her, but waited in the car, allowing the work to be hers alone. The shelter director introduced her to the routines and responsibilities, guiding her through the tasks that sustain the fragile community inside. The simplicity of the work, washing vegetables, wiping counters, sweeping floors, felt heavy in its symbolic meaning. She had come here as penance, but she would remain here to understand. Harold was the first real test of that understanding. She saw him across the kitchen, his movement steady despite the limitations of his leg. He chopped vegetables with deliberate care, concentrating on each piece as though precision offered a small escape from the chaos of his past. When he acknowledged her presence and offered her tasks to complete alongside him, the interaction unfolded not as punishment but as initiation. He did not shield her from discomfort, nor did he provoke it. Instead, he gave her space to grapple with the shame that trailed her every step. Over time, the shelter revealed its stories. Each resident carried a life once filled with jobs, families, ambitions, and unexpected fractures. A former teacher displaced by medical bills, a veteran nurse overcome by trauma, an engineer whose industry collapsed beneath him. Their paths had twisted through circumstances neither simple nor deserved. As Leia heard these histories, the simplistic narrative she had built about homelessness disintegrated. The people she once treated like scenery became individuals with depth and humanity. Harold shared his story in pieces. His service overseas, the injury that never healed, the slow unraveling of his life after returning home, and the resilience that pulled him through years of darkness. His kindness, offered despite what she had done, was the lesson she struggled with most. He insisted that growth came through action, not apology. The community seemed to echo that belief, accepting her not quickly but consistently, measuring her sincerity through the steadiness of her efforts. Her mother's presence on Tuesday evenings, quiet, deliberate, unfaltering, became another layer of understanding. Leia watched her serve meals, comfort anxious newcomers, listen to veterans with the fluency of someone who had long practiced empathy. The governor's title fell away in this setting. Here she was simply a woman offering her time. The realization that such service had been happening for years without recognition reshaped how Leia perceived power and responsibility. Her mother had lived the values she preached, even when no cameras were present. Leia's greatest failure, she realized, had been assuming her mother's values existed only in speeches. Month after month, Leia returned to Hope Harbor, each visit eroding the arrogance that once defined her. She learned to anticipate needs without being asked, to listen without interruption, to step back when someone's pride needed space. She experienced moments of grace and moments of frustration, both of which taught her the patience required to serve others. By the time spring warmed the city, her transformation had become evident to those around her. Harold requested that she continue working with the Veterans Meal Program, not out of pity, but because she had earned trust through consistency. Her apology, written in her own voice and posted publicly, was received with cautious acceptance, gradually reinforced as people saw her actions align with her words. When the day of her final court review arrived, she stood in the courtroom not as a frightened teenager, but as someone who understood the weight of her choices. Her essay, handwritten and reflective, traced her journey from ignorance to awareness, from entitlement to responsibility. She spoke of visibility, not the kind that fuels social media fame, but the kind that grants humanity to those society overlooks. She wrote about service, about humility, about her mother's unspoken lessons, and about Harold's resilience. The courtroom listened. The silence afterward felt like acknowledgement, not judgment. When Harold applauded first, others followed, filling the room with a recognition she had once pursued for the wrong reasons. Outside the courthouse, as she walked beside Harold and her mother, she felt a profound shift in her own identity. The world had not changed, but she had learned to see it differently. She had learned to see people. And in doing so, she had taken the first steps toward becoming someone worthy of being seen herself.